Two teams estimate the same backlog. One writes a number of hours next to every task, adds them up, and hands the sponsor a confident date. The other refuses to talk in hours at all, and sizes the work in points that mean nothing on a calendar. Here is the part that stings. The team that talked in hours is wrong about the finish more often. That is not a paradox. It is the single most common way an experienced project manager loses an Agile estimation question on this exam, because a number of hours feels like knowledge, and usually isn't. And there is one word sitting inside PMI's own exam outline in parentheses that proves they deliberately test this. Most people skim right past it. I'll put it on the screen before we're done, and it changes how you read a whole class of questions.
Here is the reframe that fixes it. On adaptive work, you are not trying to predict how many hours something will take. You are trying to judge how big it is compared to the things around it. Size, not time. Once you accept that, everything else in this episode falls into place.
And I'll be honest, when I first met this, I hated it. A point isn't a thing. You can't put a point on an invoice. My whole career I estimated in days and hours, because that's what a client asks for. So if you're rolling your eyes right now, good. That reaction is exactly the trap we're here to take apart.
Welcome back. This is the process domain, 41% of your whole exam and the technical heart of it, and we're still on task 8, plan and manage schedule. One thing before we go on. Last time we did the predictive side of this task, the network, the critical path, when to crash a plan. Today is the other half of the same task, the adaptive side. Story points, sizing a backlog, forecasting without a network. Same task, two completely different ways in.
And that split is not our invention. PMI wrote it into the task itself, which is why scheduling earns 2 episodes and almost nothing else does. So keep 4 ideas in your pocket for the next half hour. Story points size the work, they don't clock it. You estimate relative size, not absolute hours. Velocity is the one number those points exist to produce. And early estimates are ranges, not promises.
So walk me through the actual mistake. Where does the experienced person go wrong?
The reflex is to translate. A team says a story is 5 points, and the experienced manager quietly thinks, right, 5 points, that's about 2.5 days. Let me just multiply the backlog out and get my date. The moment you do that, you have thrown away the entire reason story points exist. You have converted a relative size back into an absolute promise, and you have smuggled in a false precision the team never had.
And the exam is built to catch that exact move. It will hand you a scenario where a stakeholder demands the estimate in hours, or a manager wants points formally converted to a schedule, and the tempting answer is the one that gives them their number. It is almost never the right answer.
See, that's the part I'd have gotten wrong. Somebody senior asks for hours, you give them hours. That's just being responsive.
At work, absolutely. On the exam, that responsiveness is the wrong reflex, because it treats an estimate as a commitment when the whole adaptive model treats it as a forecast that sharpens over time. The skill they are testing is whether you understand what an estimate actually is, not whether you can keep a stakeholder comfortable.
So the frame for the whole episode: we estimate size, we let the team's real throughput forecast the date, and we stay honest about how wide the range is early on. Not a number pulled out of the air and defended to the death.
There's a picture of a PM I keep in my head for this. Software lead sharp, runs a real sprint team. Somebody asks how long a feature will take, and without blinking he says 3 points is a day and a half, so 8 points is 4 days. Confident, fast. And completely missing the point of the tool he is holding.
That's the whole trap in one sentence. He is running his shop's habit and calling it estimation. The exam wants the PM who can hold a relative number as a relative number without immediately cashing it into hours to feel safe.
If you want to actually drill this instead of just nodding along, everything we teach has free practice questions and free flashcards waiting at certs.professorerica.com. Go build the reflex there after the video. Lewis, before we sit down at the table, hand people the single question this whole episode has to crack.
Happy to. If a story point isn't a number of hours, then what on earth is it? And how does a made-up number ever tell you when you'll be done? Hold that, because the answer is more useful than it sounds.
Let me pause for just a second because this genuinely helps. If you are getting value here, hit that like button, then subscribe and ring the bell. It costs you nothing, and it is the single biggest thing that keeps these videos coming. So let me pay off Lewis's question at the table. What is a point, and how does a made-up number ever tell you when you're done? To pressure test the answers on this one, we've got Professor Larson with us.
Glad to be here and happy to help. I'll push where the exam pushes.
Here is the honest definition, and it's smaller than people expect. A story point is a relative size. It is a single number that blends three things into one: how much effort the work is, how complex it is, and how much you just don't know yet. Not hours, size. A 5-point story is meant to be roughly 5 times the size of a 1-point story, and that is all the number promises.
Hold on, that's not an estimate, that's a mood. Just give me hours.
Except hours are the ones that lie to you. Let me show you why. Ask a room how many hours a task takes, and you'll get 5 different confident numbers, all wrong. Ask that same room whether this task is bigger or smaller than that one, and they'll agree almost instantly. Humans are terrible at estimating absolute time and genuinely good at comparing sizes. Points ride the thing we're good at.
And that isn't a slogan, it's the whole design. Let me put the two side by side. Story points on the left give you a relative size that folds in effort, complexity, and risk, and it stays stable across the whole team. Hours on the right give you an absolute time that feels precise, but comes out different for every person who picks up the task.
Look at the right-hand column. An hours estimate is personal. 8 hours for your senior engineer is 2 days for the new hire, so the same task has 3 different honest answers depending on who you ask. The point on the left doesn't move. The story is the same size no matter who picks it up. That stability is the whole reason the number is useful.
So a point isn't a mood, Lewis. It's the one thing in the room everyone can actually agree on.
Fine, I'll concede the comparison is easier than the clock. I'm not fully converted, but keep going.
Then look at the numbers you're allowed to pick from, because they're deliberately odd. Most team size on a Fibonacci scale: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, then 20, 40, 100. Notice the gaps get wider as you climb. There is no 7, no 9. You cannot argue that something is a 9 instead of a 10.
And that's on purpose, not laziness.
Very much on purpose. The widening gaps encode the uncertainty. Small work you understand well, so 1, 2, 3 lets you be precise. Big work you barely understand yet, so the scale refuses to let you pretend you can tell a 40 from a 42. The gap between 8 and 13 is honesty made into arithmetic. When a story is so big it wants a 20 or a 40, that's the scale screaming at you to break it into smaller pieces before you commit to anything.
The sequence itself isn't magic, by the way. It's the same spiral that shows up in a sunflower, and in this, a nautilus shell. The point is the pattern of widening steps, a scale that gets coarser exactly where your knowledge gets thinner.
Okay, that I like. The scale is rude to you on purpose, so you stop kidding yourself. But how does a team actually agree on a number without one loud person deciding everything?
That's the technique the exam wants you to know by name: planning poker. It was put together back in 2002, and the mechanic is clever. Someone explains a backlog item. Everyone privately picks a card from that scale and keeps it hidden. Then, on a count, everyone reveals at once.
And the hiding is the genius part. If the lead says 8 out loud first, everyone anchors to 8 and you've learned nothing. Hidden votes stop the anchoring cold. When they flip and the numbers are close, you're done. Log it and move on. When they're far apart, one person said 3 and another said 13, you don't average them. You ask both to explain. The low voter knows something reassuring, or the high voter saw a landmine nobody else did.
That conversation is the real product, not the number. The spread between 3 and 13 is the team discovering it doesn't share an understanding of the work, and finding that out now, at the table, is worth 10 times whatever number you eventually write down. Then you re-vote until it converges.
So the estimate is a byproduct. The point of the ritual is a shared understanding of the work.
Which is exactly why converting it back to hours the second the meeting ends throws away everything the meeting bought you. You'd be trading a shared relative agreement for a private, false precision.
Give me a gut check, Lewis. That scale we keep saying, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, is 20 really the pure Fibonacci step after 13?
21, if we're being pure about it.
Good ear. Pure Fibonacci would be 21, then 34. Most decks round it to 20, 40, 100 once the numbers get big, because at that size the precision is fake anyway. It's a modified scale, and that rounding is the same honesty we keep coming back to. Nobody can tell a 34 from a 40.
So we can size the work honestly, relative and hidden and discussed. But sizing is not a date. Erica, take us to the one number this whole thing exists to produce.
So the sizing is done. You have a backlog full of stories with points on them. Where does a date come from? Because a sponsor doesn't care that the login screen is a 5. They care whether they'll have it in March. This is the number that connects the two.
Velocity, say it once and it sounds like jargon. It's actually the simplest idea in Agile. Velocity is just how many points the team actually finishes in one iteration, one sprint. That's it. You don't guess it, you don't set it. You run a sprint, you count the points on the stories you truly completed, and that count is your velocity.
And the key word is finished. A story that's 90% done counts 0. It has to meet the definition of done, actually complete, before its points go into velocity. Half a bridge carries no traffic. Half a story banks no points.
Now watch what velocity does over a few sprints.
One team, 6 sprints. They finish 18 points, then 22, then 19, 21, 20, 20. It bounces around at first, then settles. You do not take the best sprint and call it your speed. You average across several, and this team's honest velocity is about 20 points a sprint. The single sprint is noise. The average is signal.
And once you have that average, the forecast is honestly just division.
Watch, add up every point still left in the backlog. Say it's 240 points of work remaining. Divide by the velocity, 20 points a sprint. 12 sprints to empty the backlog. If a sprint is 2 weeks, that's about 24 weeks. You just built a date, and you never once estimated an hour.
That's the payoff, and notice what kind of number it is. It's a forecast, and it belongs to this one team. The made-up points produce a real date because that date comes from the team's own measured throughput, not from anyone's optimism.
And here's the word I promised you at the very top. It's sitting in PMI's own exam outline, in the schedule task, in parentheses, and most people read straight past it. Story points. Estimate project tasks, milestones, dependencies, story points. PMI puts story points in writing, right beside the predictive network. And read the enabler under it, utilize benchmarks and historical data. That is velocity in plain language. Your own completed sprints are the historical data you forecast from. The exam is telling you out loud that it tests both halves of this task.
So push the team to raise velocity every sprint. A rising number wins.
And that is the fastest way to destroy the one thing velocity is good for. Velocity is a measurement, not a target. The second you reward a bigger number, the team gives you a bigger number. The same story that was a 5 last month is suddenly an 8. The points inflate, and the forecast you built on them quietly turns to fiction. You don't want a rising velocity. You want a stable one you can actually trust. If you genuinely want more throughput, you don't lean on the estimate. You clear the impediments. Fix the flaky test environment, get the decision that's been blocking them for a week. Stop pulling people onto 3 projects at once. Real throughput comes from removing friction, never from pressuring the number. That's a business environment idea, impediments, and it gets its own episode later.
So the number you're proud of isn't the big one, it's the boring, steady one.
The boring, steady one, exactly. And one more guardrail the exam loves. Velocity is team-specific. You never compare one team's velocity to another's, and you never use it to rank people. My 20 and your 30 are measured on two different point scales that mean two different things. Comparing them is meaningless, and using velocity as a performance stick poisons every future estimate you'll ever get from that team.
What about the sprint where half the team is out for the holidays? Velocity's going to crater. Is that a red flag?
No, and this is a distinction the exam rewards. There's velocity, what you actually finished, and there's capacity, how much team is even available that sprint. A holiday sprint has lower capacity, so of course velocity dips. That's expected, not a problem. What you're watching for is the trend across normal sprints, not a single dip you can fully explain. And if you want to see the work draining in real time, that's a burn-down chart, remaining points sliding toward zero as the sprint runs. A burn-down that's flat halfway through the sprint is the early warning that the forecast is slipping while there's still time to react.
So velocity forecasts, it doesn't promise, and it belongs to one team, which sets up the last big idea. Because a forecast this early comes with a health warning most managers skip right over. Here's the health warning, and it's the beat that separates people on this exam. You've sized the backlog, you've got a velocity, you've got a date. And that date on day one is close to worthless. Not wrong, just wide.
This is the one I most want to land, and it has a name worth knowing.
It's called the cone of uncertainty. Barry Boehm noticed it in software decades ago, and Steve McConnell gave it the name. Here's the finding, and it should make you humble. An estimate made at the very start of a project can be off by a factor of about 4, not 4%, 4 times. Your one-year project could honestly land anywhere from 3 months to 4 years.
Hold on, off by 4 times. Then why give a number at all on day one?
Because the point isn't the number, it's the shape. Picture a cone lying on its side. At the start, it's enormously wide, that 4 times spread. As the project goes on, it narrows, until near the end the estimate and reality nearly touch. The exam's favorite trick is to test what makes the cone narrow. Most people assume it's time. It is not.
It narrows because you make decisions and you deliver real work, not because the calendar advances. Let me lay out the moves that actually shrink it. At kickoff, you're at the widest range. Then you refine the backlog, breaking the big scary stories into small known ones. You run spikes to buy knowledge on the unknowns. And you ship real work, so delivered stories replace the guesses with facts.
Every step there is a decision or a delivery, never just waiting. You break a scary 20-point story into 4 small ones you actually understand. You run a spike, a short time-boxed investigation, to answer the technical question that was making everyone nervous. You ship a few stories, and your velocity stops being a guess and becomes a measurement. That is what pulls the cone in.
So a team that just sits and waits for certainty to arrive on its own, never refining, never shipping, keeps that 4 times cone wide open the entire time.
Right. Certainty is something you earn by doing the work, not something that shows up if you stall long enough. And that reframes the whole idea of an estimate.
It does. An estimate is a forecast, not a commitment. When you say 12 sprints, you're saying, given what I know today, this is my best projection, and it will sharpen as we learn. That is a fundamentally different promise from carving a date in stone at the widest part of the cone and staking your credibility on it.
Which is why re-estimating isn't a failure or a flip-flop. It's the design working. Every sprint you learn something, the cone narrows, and you update the forecast. A manager who treats the day one number as a blood oath is fighting the single most reliable fact we have about estimates.
And there's a rhythm to it that the exam likes. You don't reforecast in a panic the day something slips. You reforecast on a cadence every sprint or two using the velocity you've actually measured, not the one you hoped for at kickoff. So the conversation with the sponsor stops being a series of surprises and becomes a steady, here's where we are and here's the current projection.
And notice what that protects. If you never re-estimate, you're defending a day one guess against 3 months of things you've since learned, and you'll lose that fight in front of the sponsor every time. Re-estimating on a cadence means the number you're holding is always the most informed one you have. That's not indecision. That's the discipline the exam is actually testing.
But my sponsor doesn't want a range and a lecture. She wants a date.
Then give her a date with its honesty attached. Not a naked range, and not a fake precise single day either. You say, our forecast is the end of the second quarter. Here's my confidence in that today, and I'll tighten it every 2 weeks as we ship. You've given her something to plan around and told her the truth about how firm it is. That's not weakness. That's the most defensible thing you can hand a sponsor.
The false precision single date feels stronger in the meeting and is far more dangerous because the moment it's a day late, you've broken a promise you never had the information to make.
And points aren't the only scale for this, which the exam may hint at. There's ideal time, or ideal days, the time a task would take with 0 interruptions, no meetings, no context switching. It's still relative-ish, but it's closer to hours, so some teams prefer it. And for a giant backlog you haven't refined yet, you go even coarser, t-shirt sizing. Small, medium, large, extra large. You're not pretending to know a number at all, just sorting the rough shape of the work.
That tower is the whole lesson in stone, actually. They estimated the ground would hold, started building, and the real size of the problem only showed up once the thing began to lean. The ones who kept adjusting over centuries are why it's still standing. T-shirt sizing and affinity estimation are just fast, honest ways to sort a big backlog when a precise number would be a lie anyway. Coarse and honest beats precise and wrong.
And when a scenario hands you ranges and asks how confident you are in a date, that's the same instinct we met on the predictive side, running the numbers many times to get a probability instead of a promise. 70% likely by the end of the quarter is an honest answer. A single confident day almost never is.
So the honest verdict. Early estimates are wide by nature. They narrow because you decide and deliver, and the number you give is always a forecast you'll sharpen, never a promise you'll defend to the grave. Professor Larson, thank you. That's exactly the stress test I hoped you'd bring to it. Give the room the last word.
Happy to. Hold one line and you'll get these right. On the exam, an estimate is a forecast that sharpens as you learn, never a commitment you lock at the widest part of the cone. Answer from that, and the tempting confident number is almost always the wrong one.
Fast round. What is a story point?
A relative size, effort, complexity, and uncertainty in one number.
Not hours. Never hours.
How do you turn points into a date?
Velocity. Backlog points divided by points per sprint.
And you average velocity over several sprints, not one.
Is velocity a target to push up?
No, a measurement. Push it and the team just inflates the points.
And you never compare one team's velocity to another's.
Here's the picture to carry into the exam. One slider. All the way left, you're treating your estimate as a promise, a single locked date. All the way right, you're treating it as a forecast, a range you sharpen as you learn. The exam almost always rewards the right-hand end.
2 quick drills. 1. A stakeholder insists you convert the team's story points into a firm number of hours for a contract. Best move?
You don't hand over a false conversion. You give a velocity-based forecast with its uncertainty stated, and explain that points aren't hours.
2. It's day 1. The sponsor wants a single firm delivery date. What do you actually owe her?
A range honestly labeled, plus a promise to tighten it every sprint. The cone is at its widest today.
1 more, harder. Your velocity jumped from 20 to 35 in one sprint. Great news, so you forecast off the...
No, one sprint is noise. A jump usually means inflated points, not speed.
That's the one that separates people. And the sibling trap right beside it. Someone asks why the cone hasn't narrowed after 2 months, even though nobody refined a story or shipped a saying.
Because time alone narrows nothing. You have to decide and deliver.
Exactly. Waiting is not progress on the estimate. Deciding is, and delivering is.
2 questions and a couple of traps. And that's most of what this task wants from you on the adaptive side. Is it size or is it time? Is it a forecast or a promise? And what is actually narrowing your uncertainty?
And the one number to sit with. On day 1, your estimate can be off by about 4 times in either direction. 4. That's not pessimism, it's the measured shape of the cone, and it's why the honest answer early on is a range.
Carry 2 things out of here above everything. First, story points size the work, they never clock it, and velocity, your team's real measured throughput, is what turns those points into a date. Second, that date is a forecast, not a promise. It's wide at the start and it narrows only when you decide and deliver, so re-estimating as you learn is the method working, not the method failing.
And I'll say it, since I came in a skeptic. The points felt made up until I saw that they ride the thing humans are actually good at, comparing sizes, and let the team's own history do the forecasting. That's the part that turned me.
That's the whole task now. Last time, the predictive half, the network, and the critical path. This time, the adaptive half, points and velocity, and the cone. Same eco-task, 2 approaches, and the exam expects you to know which one a scenario is asking for. Next up in the process block, we take the status those forecasts produce and turn it into earned value, the math the exam actually makes you do. If this made estimation finally click, subscribe, it genuinely helps us keep making these. And the free practice questions and flashcards are waiting at certs.professorerica.com. Go earn the pass.
Before you close the tab, one question for you. What's the last estimate someone treated as a promise when it was really only ever a forecast? Tell us in the comments.
For everyone sizing the work honestly and refusing to fake the date, keep it relative and keep it honest. See you in the next one.